Hey babe, Abby J here, and today we're talking about how to survive and recover from a social disaster. Now, we've all been there and done embarrassing things that we regret, said things that we didn't mean, or flat out had something happen to us that was completely devastating and embarrassing. I am going to give you the tips that you need to not only survive that event, but to recover from those social disasters. So, if that has happened to you, girl, get out a pen and paper. Let's take some notes because we are going to talk about how to survive a social disaster. So because this topic is so important, let's just dive right into it. And the very first tip that I have for you on surviving a social disaster is assess the damage. It is so important to take a step back when a social disaster happens and assess it and look at it and break it apart and realize what has happened. Because there's a couple things that you need to assess and look at. First of all, I would challenge you to ask yourself, am I the victim? Or am I the one to blame? Was I the cause of this social disaster? Because we've been on both sides of it. And depending on if you're the victim of this or if you're the one that caused it, your next steps might be a little bit different, but that's really important to assess. It's also really important to assess, who knows about this social disaster? How many people are involved? Is it just between maybe me and somebody else? And so it feels like a huge, gigantic, I can't think of the right word. Catastrophe. Okay, that's what I was going for. A huge blunder, but really you're like, oh, the only people who know about that social disaster are me and my best friend or me and now my ex-boyfriend, right? Really sit down and I would challenge you to take out a pen and paper, do this in your journal, and just write out what happened, how you've processed it, how you've handled it, and what you think the results are. Because obviously you're thinking that this is super negative, but maybe as you break it apart and pull it apart, you're like, hey, no, I'm actually the victim of this, and everybody sees that and knows that. So it's really important to assess the damage. My second tip for you is probably the most important and time-consuming one in this process of getting over a social disaster, and that is to create a recovery plan. Now think about it. In any type of natural disaster, a disaster in society, where something really bad has happened, people come up with a recovery plan. And that's exactly what you're going to do. And you're going to do that by asking yourself these 5 questions that I've got for you. And those questions are this. 1, do I need to apologize? 2, do I need to ask for help from my parents or somebody who has a little bit more authority than I do? 3, do I need new friends? 4, do I need new standards? Or 5, do I just need to get over this? Let's talk about those questions in a little bit more depth. So, do you need to apologize? More than likely, especially if you feel like this is as big and devastating as you feel like it is, you might need to apologize. That's why it's really important in step 1 of assessing the damage. If you are, the cause of this social disaster, apologies are needed. And you probably need to think through and say, okay, I owe a major apology to my best friend. I owe one to this other girl that was there, and I owe one to my teacher, right? Or depending on the situation. Now, sometimes you don't owe an apology. An example I thought of a social disaster is if maybe your boyfriend broke up with you super publicly and it was super embarrassing. Girlfriend, unless you threw and scream and hit people, you don't owe anybody an apology for that. You're a victim in that kind of case. So just really assess do I need to apologize or do I not? Because one mistake that I've made throughout my whole life and I'm just now figuring out in my young adulthood is I over apologize for stuff and I took responsibility for things that really weren't my responsibility, and that's not healthy. So be really clear on who you owe an apology to, and be sincere and honest and give those immediately. and be really clear on not taking responsibility, especially if you're a victim of this social disaster. A lot of teens don't like to hear my advice of like, hey, do I need help from a parent? Do I need help from a teacher or somebody a little bit like has more authority and power than I do? But it's really important to ask that, especially if this social disaster was something that crossed a line or a boundary, or you feel like you might be in trouble, or you feel like, you know, something needs to be done about this. Never be afraid to go and get help. And that brings us to our other question of like, do I need new friends? Sometimes a social disaster was caused because your friends pranked you, your friends were rude, maybe your friends like totally set you up. And I'm gonna be really frank and honest with you. Do you want friends like that? Do you want to be with the type of people that caused a social disaster? Sometimes it's a genuine accident. Sometimes like it was so out of our control in the universe, it just like happened. But a lot of times with social disaster, it is through malicious intent, through people who are supposed to be our friends. So I'm asking you very sincerely, do you need new friends? Do you need to start hanging out with some new people? Which brings me to our other question, which was my fourth question you should ask yourself of like, do I need new standards? Do I need new rules? Sometimes social disasters come because we've made a mistake and we broke our own integrity. We broke our own rules, or frankly, maybe we didn't even know that was a rule we needed to set up in our life. Give yourself some grace, give yourself some forgiveness, and realize that life is a learning experience. So look at this situation. I can't talk today, but it's okay. Look at this situation and really assess like, had I had a rule of I don't go with friends that I don't know to parties that I don't know, or had I had a rule to be home by my curfew, or had I had a rule that like when my gut tells me like, ooh, Abby, you shouldn't do this, like I listen. So this is one of the most important questions you could ask in your recovery plan, because rules and standards that you personally keep will protect you. I go into massive detail about this in my high school guide. It is one of the most valuable chapters that I have to offer. So if you want to check that out, there's a link below, but I can't tell you how important your own personal standards are, and reassessing those and saying, hey, I made a mistake and I'm going to create this new rule for myself so it never happens again. And do not overlook my last of the 5 questions for you, which is, do I just need to get over this? Heart to heart with you right now. Embarrassing things happen all the time. There are times when you say and do things that you didn't mean to say and do. There are times when like crap just happens. There are times like I thought a lot about, like I was thinking about social disasters and when I felt like that had happened to me. And a lot of them actually were like, I was in a play and maybe somebody came on stage when they weren't supposed to, or maybe my costume ripped. Like, do you know what I mean? Sometimes stuff just happens and it's embarrassing and it happened and people laughed and it is what it is. And maybe, girlfriend, maybe you just need to get over this. Maybe you just need to like chalk it up to life and just move on. Okay, now that you've created a recovery plan, you walk through the 5 questions to ask yourself when you're going through a social disaster. Tip number 3, no brainer, execute it. You have taken the time to think through these questions, to think through this situation, and obviously it matters. Obviously there's some work that you need to do or you would have just gotten over it, so get to it. Don't talk yourself out of those apologies. Don't talk yourself out of like doing the hard work. Here's what I love to tell and coach individuals. If we do the hard work one time, if we deal with the discomfort right now, we don't have to deal with it later. And sometimes that's having massively hard and frustrating conversations with certain individuals. But if you do it, it's done. And I always say, let's do it before Friday. Let's do it before the weekend, right? Like, let's do it right now so that you don't have to stew and think about it. Now, yes, get yourself into a good emotional place, especially if you're feeling hurt or frustrated, but like, let's not delay discomfort just because we're worried about what other people might say or what they might do. So get to your plan, even if it means doing some hard things right now, so that you can finally get over this as soon as possible. Okay, my fourth tip, this is one that I give with so much love, and I want you to like hear it. Give it time. Time heals everything. It's a real saying for a reason. It truly is miraculous that a little bit of time, a little bit of maybe distance from certain people, distance from the situation, really does heal a lot of things. So if you've gone through your plan, you've made your recovery, or truly you're just trying to get over it, give it some time. It's really normal to think about that event a lot. It's really normal to worry about it. It's really normal to go through that whole process of like, why did this happen? And I'm so embarrassed. And what does so-and-so think? Try to avoid that. Try to like put it out of your mind, but just remember that time really does heal things. That most people are so worried about their own life that they truly aren't remembering what happened. They truly aren't worrying about it. And especially if you've cleaned up those wounds or if you've tried to fix the situation, let it be. I can guarantee you that as you give it time, you will find that people forgive, people forget, and people get over it. So make sure that you give yourself time and let situations like be so that you can get over it. Okay, babe, I just gave you 4 tips on how to get over and recover from a social disaster. I hope that these tips help you out. I know what it's like to go through some really embarrassing moments. I know what it's like to really wish you could go back and turn back the clock and, make up for those really poor decisions that you've made. But these 4 tips are as close as to turning back the clock as you can get. So try them out. Do not chicken out of any of these steps. And, leave a comment below. I know that some of these things can be a little touchy, so please DM me on Instagram. Send me a little bit of what your story is. And if I see it, I will coach you. We can always have a free coaching call. We can always talk through some of these situations. And please, 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 please check out my high school guide. Not because I'm trying to get rich from it. I'm just saying it has so much more than what I could put in a video for you. And sometimes you need a chapter on dating, and sometimes you need a chapter on social disasters, and sometimes you need a chapter on dealing with these bad friends. So check that out. Again, you got this, babe, and I know that you can recover from this. So give yourself time and some grace. So go to it, and I cannot thank you enough for subscribing. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single video on my channel helping you through mastering young adulthood. So, cannot wait to see you in my next video. Abby J out.